Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. This is episode number 45. I can't quite believe we made it to 45 episodes over the last 18 months. Thank you to each and every one of you that continues to tune in on Facebook or on YouTube to listen to, hopefully not to listen to me, but to listen to the guests that we chat to each week. As you can tell, my voice is a bit croaky because Britain's going for this kind of rain storm type thing this week, and I've been outside a bit too much, but I won't speak that much. I'm going to allow our guests hopefully to speak quite a bit. Yeah, as I say, thank you to those of you that tune in on a regular basis to listen to our guests. We've met some fantastic people from actually all over the world. Ironically, even though it's called the Hare Krishnas in Britain, all over the world, we met some fantastic devotees who have got stories to tell. Everybody's got a story to tell. Everyone's got something to share. And we're going right over the pond. So it's not even a pond, is it? We're going right over the pond this week to the United States of America. Some of you might have seen the USA playing football in the World Cup this week. They're doing particularly well. And I'd love to welcome our guest, who's in the United States, but you'll tell from his accent very shortly he's not originally from there. It's great to welcome Indranuja Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Ribo.
Lovely to see you. Thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast this week. So let's just start, I guess, from the beginning, so to speak. Tell us a bit about you and where you're from.
So I joined at the Manor when Prabhupada was there in 76. I'd been associating with the devotees actually since about 69 when I first started chanting Hare Krishna. I got my first book when I was in college in Glasgow. In 72, I met a devotee outside the Salon Tea Centre there, and it was kind of an interest. It was February, very cold, and this devotee was distributing BTGs, and I just saw him there, and it was the first time I'd ever seen a devotee, and he was dressed in dhoti. He had a T-shirt on and one of them things that they would wear, but the weird thing was he was wearing flip-flops, and he was with the, I mean, he was literally, when it's February in Glasgow, it's bitterly cold. So he was blue with the cold. And yeah, anyway, so I got a BTG, and that was the first time I'd been chanting Hare Krishna for years at that point. So then about maybe a couple of months later, I got Krishna book. And that was for me a revelation. Krishna book was like, I read it cover to cover a number of times. And I actually ended up, I used to preach from Krishna book, I remember it was, because I tried to read Bhagavad Gita, but I couldn't really get past the first chapter. It's like an amazing experience, you know, and I remember at one point after I'd moved to England, I actually moved to Cambridge, and I used to go to the Manor back and forth all the time. And had this one guy that I worked with, his name was Moji Balsad. I remember him quite well. He's an Indian gentleman. We were going to start a business together, me and him. And he would tell me stories from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and I would tell him stories from Krishna book, from the Bhagavatam. And yeah, we became quite good friends. And then by Krishna's arrangement, I met Prabhupada at the Manor in 76, and I just gave up my material life and joined right there and then. I'd been meaning to join for years. I mean, it was kind of, I tried to join in Edinburgh, but I just couldn't really get my head around it. It was too austere, you know. Anyway, so I joined at the Manor after I met Prabhupada. And that was a wonderful experience in itself. And I was a bramacari at that point for 6 years. I got married in 82, beginning of 82. But let me see. And
so were you initiated by Prabhupada in 1976?
Yeah,
okay.
I was initiated by Prabhupada in 77. In March 77. Prabhupada wasn't initiating then. He wasn't well. And I was supposed to get initiated in August, but they deferred it till the next one, and that was going to be like October or something like that. And they ended up, Prabhupada just wasn't given the initiation. And then after Mayapur, he started initiating again, and I got initiated in March. in any case, yeah. So I was a Sankirtan devotee for probably 4 years. And then at one point, I ended up running the Sankirtan party when Sivarama Swami came to England. I was his kind of right hand. And we had about, I'm going to say 300, maybe even 400, if you include all the women devotees on the street, you know. And it was kind of,
Wow.
you know, we used to travel around. He had a camper, and I would drive him around, and we would go to different parties and do stuff like that, you know. It was really pretty far out. And then in 1981, actually I'm going to say 79 or 80, we bought Chaitanya College, and I moved up to Chaitanya College at some point, I think probably 80. And we based everything out at Chaitanya College. Up until that point, everything had been based out of the manor. So we moved to Chaitanya College, and in 1981, Jai Tirtha, who was the GBC at the time and the guru at that time, had a kind of a fall down, I guess you would say. Well, he was totally fallen, but anyway, he fell down, and it kind of created some weird things. And then in 1982, after the Mayapur festival, he took all his disciples and left. That's kind of a long story in itself, and it's kind of a complicated long story, which I probably won't get into right now. But bottom line was that after a couple of months, Bhagavan was given the zone, and he was not someone, he was kind of a Donald Trump type figure, you know. He was kind of weird, you know. But he basically, as far as I could see, he was just tearing the yatra apart. And I at that point couldn't agree with a lot of his policies, and he just told me to go away, told me to leave. So I ended up in America. I was good friends with Rameshwar at the time, and I'd gotten to know him quite well. And Rameshwar invited me to come to Detroit to open a restaurant there. And we started Govinda's at the Fisher Mansion in 1982 to the huge, it was a huge deal. Every national TV station was there. The Fords were there, the Ruthers were there. And that might not mean much to you, but Ford is Alfred Brush Ford Ambarish, great grandson of Henry. He was there with his parents. His parents were both drunk. it was kind of funny, and on national news, you know. And then Lisa Ruther, Lisa Shivanti, her father was the head of the AUW, the biggest trade union in America. Big rival of Henry Ford, funnily enough. And, you know, they were at loggerheads. In fact, Ford tried to have Ruther killed at one time, and he lost his arm in this thing, you know. But anyway, so Lady Shivani and Ambarish kind of like came together and bought this beautiful mansion in the east side of Detroit, and we opened this wonderful restaurant, and I served there for a couple of years. And then various things happened, of course, stuff happens. I ended up in Canada for a year. And then I came back to England. We had a baby in England. And then we moved back to Detroit when Victor Treveria, and I don't know if you've heard of Victor Treveria, you may or may not have heard of him. But Victor Treveria is one of the pivotal figures in the English yatra. He's the person that really solidified everything in England. He was one of the best managers ISKCON ever had, you know. He passed away a number of years ago, but Vinci and me were very, very close. And he goes way back to like Cardiff. I think he joined in like 71, you know. And in any case, you know, he really brought a lot of stability to the English yatra, and especially during Jai Tirtha's reign, you know, when it was really, we were really growing crazy. We were making like 30 devotees a month, you know, it was like crazy. And That's why we ended up having to buy Chaitanya College, because, you know, at one point there was like 500 devotees living at the manor. It was ridiculous. And most of them were brahmacharis, you know. Like when we would go back from Sankirtan, we would have nowhere to sleep. There was just, we would end up sleeping in our vans, you know. Anyway, it was an interesting. In any case, I ended up in Detroit, and that was quite an adventure in itself. You know, we had a lot of devotees. We were actually making a lot of devotees even in Detroit at that time. You know, even it's kind of sad because I went back there a couple of years ago, and it's really a shell of what it was. You know, we had bus tours coming there. We had, you know, there was another devotee, Bhumadev. He was kind of another English devotee. He would take people around the building, you know, and it was like never less than 20 or 30 people touring this place. And we had a multimedia exhibit. This is before computers, you know. We had a multimedia exhibit. There was one devotee there who actually was a computer programmer who figured out how to do all this stuff, you know, with light sensors, this, that, and the next thing. We had all these mobile displays and stuff. Very, very beautiful, very wonderful kind of like exhibit. And, you know, this is the kind of thing that Prabhupada wanted, you know, dioramas, you know, that type of stuff. In any case, that was, I spent about 5 years there. We helped develop that place. And then, of course, things change. Things always change, you know, like by the middle of the 80s, ISKCON was going through some pretty major changes. Quite a number of the gurus fell down at that point, and it was then there was these different Reformation movements in 85 and 86 that tried to kind of like set new standards for how a guru should behave and this, that, and the next thing. And, you know, and kind of this is what you see today. And, you know, it's a good thing. Mostly it was a good thing, you know. It's always like getting annealed, you know, getting purified in the fire, you know. Somehow or another, you have to come through these things in order to get where you're going. In any case, after I left Detroit, we spent a year, myself and my best friend is Ankota, another English devotee. And we were both married to American devotees. So for us, it was easy to move to the States. So we ended up in Detroit together. And then we ended up moving to Denver. We spent about a year there. And then I came back to England. My kids were, I guess they were like 6 and 7, something like that at that point. And we wanted to send them to school in England, just thought it might be nice for them. So they spent a couple of years here. I went through kind of a tragedy. One of my kids was killed in an accident. That was another. I mean, you talk about Krishna's mercy, you know. Sometimes just Krishna gives you so much mercy, it's hard to believe it's mercy. Anyway, I get a lot of mercy. I have to be, you know, I feel very blessed. And we ended up coming back to the States. And after going to Hawaii for a year and then Las Vegas, we ended up here in Kansas. And we bought a piece of land in 1998 and developed it as a little yoga ashram, yoga retreat. And Kota's wife, Gopi, is she's taught yoga for probably 30 years, but her speciality was teaching yoga teachers. So she ended up starting this ashram here, and then we would have guest speakers come on a regular basis, and that's how Ridananda Maharaj came. Oh, many devotees came. You know, many devotees came and spoke. Tripurari Swami came a couple of times. Anyway, we had a lot of different devotees come, and we became somewhat, I wouldn't say we're famous, but we're known outside of ISKCON as a place to stop in and check out, you know. If nothing else, we have cows, it's a very beautiful place. river runs through it, and you know, very nice. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I have a regular Bhagavatam class every Monday evening with a number of devotees, and that's where you met Ben. Ben is one of the devotees who's been a regular here for the last few years. We have a congregation, probably 100 people will come here. You know, it's not a massive congregation by anyone. I mean, but we will have some nice festivals. We've had weddings where 300-400 people have come. We've had 3-4 sannyasis come for festivals, that type of thing. Very nice.
So these 100 people in the congregation, they are Americans. They're people from elsewhere.
American, Indian. Yeah, they're American Indians. Some of them, they're regular American guys like Ben. All sorts of different stratas. There's 4 universities right near us. Even not talking about Kansas State, but actually here in this area. We are 10 miles south of a city by the name of Lawrence, Kansas. And Lawrence has 2 universities, but the big university is the University of Kansas. And it's for its basketball team, for one and else, you know, but it is a big institution. It's got 35,000 students. And we often get students come here from there when they find out about us, you know. And Ganapati Swami had preached there for years and years and years. In fact, there's even, I don't know if you ever find it, in 1975 on the cover of a Back to Godhead magazine, there's a picture of one of the Radha Damodar buses, a sannyasi, and a lecturer or a professor from KU who's kind of still there. His name's him. But he had written a book on New Vrindavan. Actually, he'd written a book about communes in America, but one of the big chapters was on New Vrindavan. So he became sucked into the ISKCON gravitas, you know, and I ended up meeting him, and he would have me come to his class and give classes, you know, on Gaudiya Vaishnavism fairly regularly. I did it over the years, maybe once or twice a year, you know. And actually, some of the people that are here now are from these days, you know. So yeah, we have, I would say 100. There's maybe 30 or 40 that are solid kind of devotees. A few of them have taken initiation. Quite a few have taken initiation. And then the rest are just kind of like friends, you know. Yeah.
So do many of them or any of them live at the community?
Yeah, we have a few here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, including the kids, probably about 15.
That's really good. That's really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice place. We have let's see, 3 houses, and my house has 3 apartments in it. I've got a big house, and I split it into 3. And my son lives in one apartment. There's a couple lives in the other. They're both devotees, and then myself and my wife. My other kids live in Lawrence nearby, and they come regularly. And then Ankota, he lives. The yoga studio, I actually ended up converting the yoga studio into a residence, and a really nice 2-story residence. And he and his wife moved into that when she retired. And then his eldest son, Neela, whose clinic I manage at my clinic in Lawrence, Kansas, he lives in their house with his wife and 3 kids. So it's like that's there. And then Krishna Das and his wife live across the way, and they have cows also. And then Hladini Shakti lives, there's a nice cabin out in the woods, and then there's a lady, Jairadika, lives above the barn. So we have a number of people. And then we've got cabins and yurts and stuff that people will come and stay in, you know, occasionally.
It sounds amazing, actually. It sounds really nice. A very idyllic place to visit and stay at.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, yeah. You know, and it's like, you know, what can I say? I've lived here 20-something years. It gets a lot mundane when you've lived so long.
Yeah.
In fact, no, it's beautiful. And we have a beautiful temple with the deities. And, we have a regular practice, with myself, my wife, and Kota and Gopi. They have a morning program every day. And we have my wife does her puja every day. I do the puja in the evening, put the deities to rest and have arti and stuff. So we've tried to maintain our sadhana, all these years, and to keep it together and do a little bit of preaching just to kind of keep your hand in. And then I'm part of this bigger sangha, the Sri Chaitanya Sangha, that has that is really kind of like Brighton is one of the places where Sri Chaitanya, but it's all over the world actually. There's devotees. Oh, it's not, but it doesn't. Tripurari Swami isn't someone who likes to just go out and make devotees. That isn't his style at all. He's more of a recluse. Really, he loves writing, and he has his books are, for me, they're amazing. They're just a revelation. In fact, I often say this, that I'd read Bhagavad Gita probably 8 or 9 times, Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. But when I read Tripurari Swami's Bhagavad Gita, and I actually read them both simultaneously, so I was reading verse to verse and purport to purport, I really started to understand what Prabhupada was saying. It's like amazing. Don't get me wrong, I love Prabhupada's books. I've read every single one of his books many times, so I have a great,
Can we talk a bit about your relationship with Tripurari Swami, Tripurari Swami, in terms of, I guess, kind of when you first met him and how you've got more kind of, and words are very difficult, particularly when different people are watching and listening and kind of analyzing what I'm saying. But we kind of a kind of allegiances maybe towards him over the years, or so tell us a bit about that and how that's worked.
The very first time I met Tripurari Swami was in 1980, and I was at the Mayapur festival, and Sivarama Swami says, "Hey, I want to introduce you to this devotee. He made a huge difference to my life." And we went down to the Ganges, and this Tripurari Swami standing in the Ganges chanting his Gayatri, and it was like he was like effulgent. It was amazing. He was like, wow. And that was that was my very first time. And it was the only time I met him in ISKCON, funnily enough. That was the one only time. And then in, I'm going to say 2009, I was on a business trip to Raleigh. Raleigh in the kind of southern part of the US on the eastern side. So kind of like halfway between Florida and Washington, DC, that kind of area. So I was there on a business trip, and I'd take my wife and my son. At that time, my son was quite young. And we were, I have a very good friend there. His name is Madan Gopal, and his wife, Garangi Priya. Madan is like my son. He's just a sweet, incredibly nice devotee. And he had told me that Tripurari Swami was coming to give a class there, and that he was very, very, he really liked Tripurari Swami. And I had his Bhagavad Gita, and I had read his Bhagavad Gita, but it hadn't really made much impression on me. So I said, "Oh, I'd love to come." So we went along there, and he gave this class that day that just totally blew me away. I was just like, wow, who is this person, But really, my wife was just completely, she said, "Wow, this is Guru." And it was like, I went, wow, yeah. And my wife is not, she's very quiet, very introvert, she's not someone who kind of like will kind of make a big deal about something, But she was really taken. So we went to see him, and we had a nice conversation. And he explained the difference between a Siksha and a Diksha Guru, which was something that, in theory I've read. But, he made it fairly clear what the difference was. And I went, wow, that's interesting. So then I started reading his books. I got all his books, I read them all. And it was interesting because I was reading them with Ganapati Swami. Now, Ganapati Swami's, if you ask anybody who's a book distributor, he's probably the biggest book distributor in the world. But you would never know because he never reports it. He couldn't care less about it. He is, he just, He's the kind of person that he'll go to the Grand Canyon, he sets up a book table, and he just distributes books. I mean, he's 73 years old, you know. He just sits there and he distributes books. He's been doing it since the day he joined in 1971. He's never stopped doing it, ever, you know. So all these years, and he's been a sannyasi since he was 78. So I had great respect for him. He really loved Bhaktivedanta. He would come here and we would have these really long discussions. He lives in a little camper and we would read together. We would literally read line for line. We would take it, whatever it was we were reading at the time. I remember we read the whole of Brihat Bhagavatamrita together. That was an interesting kind of adventure. But there was one book in particular that I'd gone, which was Sri Shastakam, that Tripurari Swami had written a commentary on. And we read this together and it totally blew my mind. I was like, I went, oh, this is it. I figured it out. He's my Siksha Guru, you know. So I took Tripurari Swami as my Siksha Guru at that point. And that was interesting in itself because, you know, there aren't a lot of Prabhupada disciples that will do that. You know, there's not, you know, most would like to just fly their own plane, so to speak. But I realize I have my limitation. No matter how much I've read, no matter how many devotees I know, and nice devotees, I'm not talking about kind of flaky devotees, I'm talking about people like Guru Raj Swami and Radhanath Swami and like that. I never got that connection, you know. I never felt that kind of like guru connection. The connection it's an essential part of who we are, you know. It's like, you know, you can say, what is devotional service? Devotional service is, you know, hoitikia pritiyate yama suprasiditi. Yeah, it's doing something with no hint of motivation and without any idea that it'll ever end. You know, that's the definition of love, right? So, but what we really need is Guru Bhakti. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. And I felt like I had that for Prabhupada, you know, like truly I worshipped him every single day of my life. And I felt like that was, but there's a problem there because that's kind of a one-way thing, you know. Yeah, Prabhupada came to me in a few dreams and he gave me some instructions and some stuff like that. But still, I can't sit like you and talk to him, you know. And really, we need that, you know, as devotees, we really need the ability to have senior figures in our lives that you can literally, you know, pour your heart out to, or just ask complicated, difficult questions, you know. And I had a really nice relationship with these devotees, especially Ganapati Swami. I never felt like that, but with Tripurari Swami, I really felt like that. Like, you know, and he does not take fools lightly, you know. It's like, you know, don't ask him stupid questions. You know, he was just here recently, staying at my house for a few days, and it was wonderful. You know, we built a bonfire outside, and all the devotees came, and you know, we probably had 20 devotees around the bonfire. We made some tea, and it just happened to be that day was what's it called again? Gopastami. The day that Krishna became a cowherd, and he told the whole story of Krishna. And it's a very funny story. It's a wonderful, I wish I'd recorded it, but it's a beautiful story about how Krishna became a cowherd. And he told this whole story. And everybody was dead quiet as he just explained all this. And then the next day, he just gave a Q&A, and people were just asking questions, you know. And that was very nice also, you know. So that's kind of how I see him. He's a very important part of my life. He's a devotee that I think is very misunderstood by ISKCON especially. But, you know, that's okay. You know, I get it also that one size doesn't fit all, and I would never even think of saying that everybody should become, you know, a follower of Tripurari Swami. I don't think that would be right. But at the same time, I kind of feel like ISKCON would do very well to occasionally take the advice of devotees like him, you know, especially when it comes to points of Siddhanta, you know, because there are certain things that I really just can't understand why the devotees, it's senior devotees. I'm not talking about rank and file. I'm talking why senior devotees can't really.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of preaching to someone who's on the same hymn sheet, the same side as the hymn sheet as you. I agree with you completely. And you know, if you look at how the Hare Krishna movement is in the world at the moment and how we'd all love it to move forward, I think ISKCON should be a lot better at looking over the wall or opening the door every now and then and just you know, talking to others who are outside of ISKCON, still in the Gaudiya family, but just talking to, because there's so many great, wonderful you know, gurus and leaders and spiritual guides in other mats that have something to contribute. And I think ISKCON has this fear, which it shouldn't fear anything. It doesn't need to fear anything.
Yeah, I don't understand where that fear comes from, but you know, anyway. There's actually an interesting story about that the Hare Swami tells. He met Hare Keshava, that's Prabhupada's godbrother, who was kind of a pariah in the Gaudiya math. He had, I can't remember exactly what it was, but something had happened. But Prabhupada and him were very close friends. O.B.L. Kapoor, I don't know if you've ever read any of his books or anything. They're around, you can see them. Very intelligent, wise man. He passed away a number of years ago. But in any case, Prabhupada brought him into ISKCON in, I'm going to say 72, something like that, when he was in Vrindavan. And O.B.L. Kapoor, Hare Krishna Prabhu, said, you know, your disciples are so, it's like they're so inward leaning, it's hard to even talk to them, you know. He said, that's okay. Prabhupada said, that's okay. It's like when you have a new tree, you build a fence around the tree, but eventually the tree outgrows the fence. And that's what will happen with this one. Well, I think we just kept building the fence out until the tree gets smothered by the fence, you know. I think that's going to happen. But let me tell you a story about another devotee that I met. His name was Chinjir Swami. Now, Chinjir Swami is the head of the Sri Sampradaya. The Sri Sampradaya is not a Gaudiya line, even vaguely a Gaudiya line. You know, obviously, it's coming, you know, a completely separate Sampradaya. So at one point, I happened to be at the Denver ISKCON temple, and then the temple president in Denver is another very dear friend of mine. Him and his wife are like my kids also. I consider that, and he's a very sweet devotee, Tushta Krishna, very, very advanced, very sweet devotee. He's been temple president there for many, many years. Anyway, so half his congregation there are Sri Vaishnavas. Probably half, maybe a little less, but something like that, you know, Indians from the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. And when I happened to be there, one of their, and this is a leading congregation member there, he had asked if, since this devotee, Sri Chinjir Swami, was coming, if he could come for Janmashtami. It just happened to be Janmashtami, and he's there, right? So Tushta's like, kind of freaking out about it, you know, he's wondering if this is a great idea. So he calls Hare Swami up, and Hare Swami explains, this is a great devotee, this is a wonderful devotee. Why wouldn't you invite him? You know, why wouldn't you do that? So, and he explains the whole, because Hare Swami has read just about everything. You know, he's read Vishnu Purana, he's read all these different things. And he knows the history of all these different sampradayas. So he explained to him the history of the Sri Sampradaya, how, you know, what their shastra is, how they see Krishna, you know, etc., etc. So Tushta wasn't blindsided. So Chinjir Swami comes, and he comes in. I remember it was interesting. He's quite a young man. He's probably 40. He had taken sannyas at 22 from his grandfather, who was the head of the Sampradaya before him. And he'd given them sannyas and given them the responsibility of steering that. Instead of his father, it went from the grandfather to the grandson. So he had been a sannyasi for many, many years, and he was still a young man. So he came in and made this roaring kirtan. Well, the Sri Sampradaya don't have kirtan. So he's like amazed, you know, it's like, this is incredible. And then he goes in front of the deities, flat out Dunderback, yeah, and he gets up and we're having this kirtan and everything's just peachy, and he's like starts jumping up and down, and it's like, it's very beautiful. And then the kirtan ends, and we asked him, could you say something about Janmashtami? So he tells a story about Krishna visiting Hastinapur and going to the house of Vidura. So there's a number of different stories about this. The one that we have comes from the Bhagavatam. And in the Bhagavatam, Krishna goes to the house of Vidura. Vidura isn't there, but his wife's there. And she is so freaked out seeing Krishna that she's like frozen. She can't do anything. So Krishna says, well, won't you invite me in? So she invites him in. Well, won't you give me something to eat or a seat or something to drink? And she's like, okay. I don't have any. What are these? And he points to some bananas, and I'm paraphrasing. So she starts peeling the bananas, throwing away the banana and giving him the peels, and Krishna's eating the peels, and then Vidura turns up. So it's a very sweet story, Krishna goes to the Bhakti, right, obviously, and where's the Bhakti? The Bhakti is with Vidura, right? That's his devotee, not Duryodhan, who had cooked this huge feast, done this elaborate thing for Krishna, and Krishna just ignored him. But in the Vishnu Purana, however, there's a different story. So Krishna goes to the house of Vidura, and this is Chanjir Swami. So they had given him this asana, that they give the Bhagavatam class on, and it's kind of like a nice asana. So Chanjir Swami jumps up on the Vyasasana. Doesn't sit on it, he jumps on it, right? And he starts telling the story. He says, so Krishna comes to Hastinapur, ignores Duryodhan, and goes to the house of Vidura. And there's Vidura and his wife there. And Krishna says to Vidura, can I have a seat? So, no, can I have something to eat? And Vidura says, hang on just a minute. He says, well, can you give me a seat? Just a minute. So he jumps up. So Vidura jumps up in the seat. So when Vidura, he's play acting this, so he jumps up in the seat, starts to jump up and down. And Krishna says, what are you doing, Vidura? And Vidura says, checking for enemies. You never know. There might be enemies under this seat. It's funny. So he told this whole story about Vidura. Anyway, he's a sweet devotee, So the next day, now it happens that Krishna was born, Janmashtami is defined by the moon, right? Well, no, actually it isn't. It's defined by the star Rohini. We always use the moon as the reference point. But that particular year, the star Rohini was an ascendant the next day. So we celebrated Janmashtami. Then the next day we have Vyas Puja, right? And then Chanjir Swami celebrated Janmashtami that day because they follow the star, you see. So we went to this devotee's house where Chanjir Swami was, and he was doing this puja. So it was a big house, and there had to be, I'm going to say there was probably 10 Brahmin priests from South India there doing all this very elaborate puja. Every single person was chanting Vishnu Sahasranam. We actually started, we had a kirtan. We started with a kirtan. Then as soon as we were finished with the kirtan, they started chanting Vishnu Sahasranam. I don't know if you've ever heard Vishnu Sahasranam. It's totally if you can find a temple that has Vishnu Sahasranam, it's really a wonderful experience. They chanted it for 4 hours.
Wow.
Sahasranam. We were just sitting there bathed in Vishnu Sahasranam. Myself, Tushta and one other devotee. We were just kind of like there, just being bathed in this pure goodness, this wonderful kind of thing. And in the meantime, he's doing his puja, and he'd been doing it for about 6 hours at this point. And it went out, I guess his puja for Janmashtami goes on for about, 8 hours or something like that. Turns out he worships this little Krishna, solid gold Krishna with diamond eyes, and it's Natabar. He's dancing. It's a beautiful little on a swing. And he does all this puja to Krishna for hours and hours, So eventually he took us down to take darshan of his deity. We went down and just like, I mean, I don't know what to say. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, you know. And here he was. He was just, you could see he was just completely in ecstasy. This man was just completely entranced by his puja, by his Ishtadev, you know, his Thakurji.
Mm.
And, you know, I just was like, I felt so blessed that I had met this man, that I could have, that I met a devotee from a completely different sampradaya, but it gave me faith in my sampradaya. It gave me faith in my parivar, you know, that I could really, you know, these are mysterious, these are mystical, mysterious things, you know, when we have this opportunity, you know, and we have to embrace them. I remember years when I was a brahmachari, Krishna Das, I don't know if you know Krishna Das Swami, and anyway, he was in England for years and years. You might know him well. I don't know.
Krishna Das Goswami. He was Indian or English?
Yeah, Indian. You know, he's Indian.
Yeah. He had a lot of followers in Coventry.
Did he? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think I know.
He didn't have any followers. I knew him when he was just, but he took me to some different Hindu temples and, you know, exposed me to, and this is as a brahmachari, you know, and exposed me to different cultures and different ideas, you know, which I thought was wonderful, you know. That was the thing I liked about England. England was a lot more open-minded than America, a lot more, you know. Americans tend to be kind of fanatical about Krishna. A lot more fanatical. Not so much nowadays. It's really become passé, you know. The temples in the US are kind of snoozy, you know. They aren't. There are some temples that are quite busy, but a lot of them are really quite it's just Indians, really. And that's, well, don't get me wrong, they're wonderful devotees, but you don't see so many, you know, Western devotees. There are very few. And then again, you know, like when I lived in Dallas for a year, the Dallas temple, and they would probably get 1,500 Indians turn up on a Sunday, you know, for the Sunday program. It was very nice. But after the Sunday program, all the Gurukulis, the guys that had been at the Gurukula are still there. And these are older, you know, they're 20, 30-year-old, you know. They would all have kirtan, you know, they would just go into the temple and just have these roaring kirtans for an hour or two, you know. And that was only, you'd never see a Westerner at that temple, really, you know. I was kind of the exception there because, you know, I wasn't Indian, you know.
Can we talk a little bit about Ireland?
Ireland, yeah.
I'm conscious we're having a great chat. It's fantastic to hear about what's happening in America.
Right.
I particularly want to talk about Ireland. Because I'm aware that you were instrumental in opening the temple in Dublin.
Right.
I believe.
Yes.
So can you tell us a bit about that?
1977. So what happened was there were a couple of devotees, Tribhuvannath was one of them, who had actually started the temple, but it never lasted, in probably 74 or something like that. And then in 77, Adhikara, oh, come on. I can't remember.
It's been so long.
Two householder couples and me. I was sent there by Jai Tirtha to help them start the temple. So the four of us, husband and wives, and one of them had a kid. Ruchira and Adhikara, they had a kid. And then there was, anyway, what's his name? I can't remember his name. It's funny, terrible at names. So Ireland was interesting. I had been going to Ireland since 76, Sankirtan party. And we used to do this thing. We'd go just one village, next village, next village, next village, town, village, village, village. And I can tell you there's many interesting Sankirtan stories about that, very interesting. But we started a temple and we were living in the outskirts in a little semi-detached house for a couple of months. I was sleeping on the couch, I remember. And then we got this place in Belvedere Square. I don't think they have it anymore, but it was like a 5-story walk up, you know. And we converted the second floor to a temple. And we just started preaching like crazy. It was hard. And Irish didn't become devotees quickly, you know. But you know, for instance, I preach to a lot of the devotees, that Irish devotees that are now devotees. Time, you know. So I was there for almost 2 years, and yeah, I mean, one time I remember myself and this devotee Janika Raj. We went down to the main street there. I forget the name of it. Anyway, right outside the post office, and we had a kirtan, and we stopped 6 lanes of traffic.
Wow.
Hundreds of people around us, just the two of us. We're having this incredible kirtan, and then we get arrested, and we get dragged, thrown in jail for disturbing the peace. We went up to the assizes, and it's like Victorian in them days. Like, it was really dark, kind of these judges, you know, really dark paneled wood and all the rest of it. And the cops telling the judge that we had stopped 6 lanes of traffic and caused a big nuisance. And I'm standing there in my dhoti with tilak and all the rest of it. And the judge is looking at me going, "Who are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a Gaudiya Vaishnava, Your Honor. You know, we're an ancient sect from India. And that's part of our ritual, is that we chant the holy names in the street, kind of like the Salvation Army." And he says, "Oh, Salvation Army, I've heard of them." He says, "Case dismissed."
Wow.
Let's go. He says, "Okay." So then we just would regularly do that and be a big nuisance to the police. But it was wonderful, you know. The Irish loved us, you know. They had just this nice thing about, you know, especially the Southern Irish. I mean, we went north and south, we didn't discriminate. But the Southern Irish were very open, you know. They were very easy to talk to. And I remember having long conversations with priests on the street, you know, we would have just these, and we would talk about how the similarities, you know, what makes Christianity, but the essential parts of it. And we would always end up agreeing, yeah, we have more alike than we have apart. So it was nice.
Fantastic. Yeah. That's a great story you've told, being in Ireland for 2 years, opened the temple. I think the temple there now is different, in a different location to that particular temple. I don't know the history of the devotees in Ireland, but I think it's moved a number of times. They're in a place now called Middle Street. I think it's Middle Street or something like that. But yeah, it's
we were right in the, I think, just off the city centre in Belvedere Square. Belvedere Square was kind of like it was actually quite a nice all Victorian houses kind of thing, you know, walk-ups. Nice.
So another question, I guess I probably could have asked when we were talking more about the 70s and 80s, but your family. So you've mentioned you've got a sister in Bournemouth. We were chatting about that earlier. What did your family think when you joined the Hare Krishnas those years ago?
That's interesting. Well, my parents were born again Christians. Oh yeah, very much like that. But myself and my brother, actually, I have 2 brothers. And in 1973, my eldest brother met Prabhupada at the Manor just before the opening of the Manor.
Wow.
He'd gone there he was a businessman, and the devotees were trying to raise money in the Edinburgh Temple. And they said, well, I think what they really wanted was just a lift down to the Manor. They didn't have a decent vehicle. So my brother agreed to take them down there. So he drove 400 miles down to the Manor. And then they kind of abandoned them in the Manor, you know, and he just wandered around for a few days there, you know, because it was a construction site. And then eventually this devotee came and got him and said, "Oh, Prabhupada wants to meet you." And Johnny knew nothing. Like me and my other brother, his name's Gordon Matai, but my other brother and I had been chanting Hare Krishna for years. We had read Prabhupada's books, blah, 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 you know, so we kind of understood the philosophy and stuff. But Johnny had never chanted Hare Krishna. He knew nothing about Krishna consciousness, except that these 2 guys, these 2 devotees, had asked him to come and meet their guru, you know. So they came and got him, and they're walking up to Prabhupada's room. And Johnny turns to this devotee and he says, "So what should I do?" He said, "Oh, just follow me. Don't worry. You just pay your obeisances." He says, "What are obeisances?" He says, "Just follow me. Don't worry about it." So Johnny knew Hare Krishna, right? He knew that. So they got into Prabhupada's room, and there's all these devotees in his room. And this devotee comes in front of Prabhupada, fly out Dandavats in front of Prabhupada. So Joe, okay, fair enough. So he's getting down, and as he's getting down, he's going, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. And all the devotees started laughing because they thought it was kind of a funny, you know. And Johnny get really embarrassed, he get beat red, embarrassed, and Prabhupada was angry at the devotees. He didn't like embarrassing people. So when Johnny finally sat down with his beat red embarrassment, Prabhupada looked at me and went, he told him, come here. So Prabhupada shuffled over, come here. So eventually Johnny was sitting right in front of Prabhupada. I mean, literally right in front of him. And in front of Prabhupada, there was a tray of sweets. So Prabhupada started asking Johnny why he did this, that, and that. And as he's talking to him, he's feeding him. He starts feeding him sweets. And Johnny's eating these sweets, really having a marvelous time. These are really delicious sweets, you know. And Prabhupada starts to preach to him. So for 20 minutes, Prabhupada preached to him. And Johnny became a devotee, just like that.
Wow.
Rounds, 4 regs, I mean, literally, like that. He got him a bead bag. Prabhupada taught him how to chant Hare Krishna. I mean, it was like, so when Johnny came back from there and I met him, I was like, who is this guy? He stopped smoking, stopped drinking, stopped eating meat. It was like, wow, this is really remarkable, you know. What's going on here, you know? And he did marvelously well. He had no association whatsoever, but he did it for 6 months without any association, you know. And the association he had was pretty bad. The devotees weren't really following the principles. They weren't really doing much of anything, actually. So they didn't really encourage him, which was kind of bad. And then, so that was my brother. He ended up becoming a born-again Christian, but he still gets some kind of fond feelings for Prabhupada. But my elder brother, Gaur Natai, he went to Canada and he met the devotees in Canada and he joined in Winnipeg. And then he came back and he converted all my friends. I mean, there was about 16 of us became devotees. He converted all my friends to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And we all, you know, everybody was chanting Hare Krishna. We had a big altar. We moved to England and we had this big altar. We'd invite all the hippies to take prasadam, you know. We'd cook these huge feasts and distribute them to all the hippies and stuff, you know. And then eventually he just joined at the manor, and then I came right behind him and joined also.
Wow. Wow. So both of your brothers became devotees. I mean, one of them is now born again Christian. But that's quite remarkable, the fact you were all raised as kind of Christians, or your parents were born again Christians.
Yeah. No, we were all born again Christians. Yeah. I mean, we belong to a very right-wing sect of Christianity called the Brethren. And now I think they're all Pentecostals, I believe.
Yeah, I'm aware of the Brethren. There's one Brethren church in Bath where I live, and they're very conservative.
Very right, right wing. You know, they call them the wee free in Scotland. You know, it's they all wear dark and wear hats and stuff. You know, it's kind of odd. But I think my parents my brother-in-law converted from Catholicism because of my sister to become a born-again Christian, and he became a minister, a Pentecostal minister, and you know the whole family then became Pentecostal. So at least a Pentecostal dance.
So your sister in Bournemouth, she never became a Gaudiya.
She was born again, and then she ditched that about 10 years ago because she just couldn't handle it. Now she meditates. I've taught her how to chant Hare Krishna, and you know she's very sweet. Marion is a very, very sweet girl, and I'm going to take her over to Brighton when I come, you know, introduce her to the devotees there. Maybe we'll go up to her also and see the deities, you know.
Yeah. I think it's quite remarkable how, you know, one of your the stories of your brothers, and particularly the one that went to Canada, you know, and the fact back in the 70s and 80s, I'm getting a bit nostalgic now. I mean, I wasn't around them, but you hear stories of devotees everywhere. You know, back on the streets of England in the 70s and 80s, the devotees were everywhere. And now they're not.
You never see them,
unfortunately. No. I mean,
because it's become more of an Indian phenomenon now. You know, the the Indian community have embraced Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and it's a good thing. But you know, I even see that here. There's a ISKCON temple 60 miles from me in Kansas City. And we used to go fairly often, but the brahmacharis come here to see the cows. But for years they weren't allowed to come because we weren't ISKCON, you know. So it was just fine. I never, it didn't bother me that that was the case. I just felt like it's a shame that they can't come and see the cows at least and do some go puja, you know, go see them. Yeah. But anyway, now, interestingly enough, so that's nice.
Yeah. So even though that you're a Prabhupada disciple, in terms of that, you know, formal Diksha sense from the 70s, that they were still not allowed to visit.
No, it's because we're considered Gaudiyas because Hare Swami was this persona non grata in ISKCON. Therefore, in fact, I was banned from ISKCON for years because, yeah. Again, I don't really care because I like Dallas, and you know, I know the temple president in Dallas. I go to Denver. I mean, he's never going to not have me come. You know, it's that type of thing. So it's not for me. It's not a huge deal. I mean, if I were ever banned from the manor, for instance, that would be a drag because I love Radha Gokulananda. You know, I mean, I doubt they would give me the red carpet or anything like that, but at least I could probably go and take darshan.
Fantastic. Well, believe it or not, we've been talking for almost an hour already.
Wow, amazing.
It's been great, and it's just been great for me just to hear your story. You've got a fantastic story, and so many great kind of gems there from Gaudiya Vaishnava history in the last 50 years. So how are we? So I don't want to kind of pry into people's ages, but when you started chanting in 1969,
I was 16. 16, yeah.
Wow.
Well, you know, I turn 70 next year.
Okay. So. Yeah. It's a long time, and it's great that you've been, you know, around the family, the community, because you and I have probably met so many people over the years, devotees, that they come along, they shave up, they start chanting and everything, and then after 6 months to a year, they just fall away because it's actually not that easy. To some extent, it's not that easy, and to do it for 55 years or whatever, or 53 years.
Yeah, you've got to, you know, if I had any advice to anybody, I'd say to them, don't get mental about it. You know, I just every morning, I have a routine every single morning. Before I go to work, I chant all my rights. I mean, that's the one thing that I always, and even if I can't get them all done, then you just get them done, you know, it's only 16 rounds. It doesn't take any time. What are you doing anyway? I mean, you pick up your dumb phone and that's the other thing that just drives me nuts. People just constantly on their phone. What a waste of time, you know? I mean, I use my phone, but honestly, I spend hardly any time on it. But the truth of the matter is, I just have a routine every morning, and I do it every single morning. I actually have a treadmill. I like to keep myself fit, and that's where I just walk on the treadmill and chant until I'm done, you know. And then I'm fit also, you know. So I feel good, you know. I feel like I'm okay. That's good. I had a heart condition 5 years ago. Almost died. And my doctor told me, you got to work out every day. It's not just a question of walking, you got to sweat, you know, really got to do that. Every devotee should do that. In fact, every person should do that. But every devotee should do that. We tend to get very lazy, you know. And it's fine when you're young like yourself. But when you hit your middle 40s, in your 50s, you put on weight and your metabolism slows down. It's a lot harder to get fit. So...
Yeah, we need to look after the body, definitely. I mean, I think certainly when you join the movement, there's this, you know, I was very surprised when I first joined the movement about the whole concept of prasadam. And, you know, from the outside, often people think of Eastern spiritual traditions as very austere when it comes to eating, like the Buddhists, you know, you don't eat a lot maybe. But then you join the Hare Krishnas and actually you're encouraged to have a lot of prasadam. And you think, oh, it's prasadam, it's spiritual food. You can eat as much as you want, but then it's karma free, but not calorie free. So you start putting on weight. And actually, it's like you've put on all this weight. I used to be a lot slimmer before I joined the movement. I'm hiding it all the time. But yeah, it's you have to be very disciplined. You have to be disciplined.
Yeah. We my wife's vegan, so it's very, she cooks very nicely, so it's like, she tries to really be very careful with her diet. She's very, very careful.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I was going to say something that.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say? Please share it with us. I mean,
Oh yeah. So the thing about the body is this: that body, your body, my body. When you take initiation, it's no longer your body. It's a sadhaka deha. It's the body of a sadhaka. You understand? It's God's gift to you as a sadhaka to have this body. Therefore, you've got to look after it. It behooves you to look after your body. We are not this body, but in one sense, we are this body. Because if that's been given to you by your guru as a sadhaka deha, then it's very important that you look after it. So, another little bit of advice.
That's actually a great piece of wisdom to end on, I think, actually, that just reminding us we're not the body, but we have to look after our body. Definitely. Well, Indra, it's been fantastic to have you on this week's podcast.
It's been nice being here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great to hear your stories and your journey over the last 50 odd years. Quite remarkable. Yeah. So yeah, and thank you for kind of sharing your stories and your kind of your experiences also with Sivarama Swami, who's got a kind of growing following here in the UK.
Nice.
Yeah, down in the Brighton area, and he's also got some disciples in London as well, which is fantastic.
Oh, okay, that's nice.
Kind of growing following. Yeah, great. So I think I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody watching or listening, and you and I can have a bit of a debrief after.
Okay.
Yeah. So so thank you all for tuning into this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. If you're watching this on Facebook or on YouTube, feel free to put hopefully a positive comment, share the link with your friends or family, and yeah, respond with a nice emoji like was it love, care, or like. Hopefully you're not angry with it. But yeah, and please do send us your feedback if you want to get in touch with Indra. If you private message this platform, this page, and I can certainly privately with him share his details. Yeah, and if any, I don't know, any devotees in the UK that haven't seen Indra today for the first time in 40 years and want to reach out to him, then maybe that'll happen. I don't know, rekindle some old things. Certainly when we were chatting before we started this recording, we did some name dropping, and we both know people that are still around the UK yatra after all these years. So thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you all again next week. Thank you. Hare Krishna.